Barron Trump roared, "She'd defame my family," and waved a lawsuit like a weapon. His evidence, a distorted quote, meant to end Jasmine Crockett's career. But in seconds, she turned the ambush upside down, shredding his claim with facts too sharp to ignore. So what devastating truth made Donald Trump's son crumble in front of Jasmine Crockett? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The hearing room glowed under harsh, fluorescent lights, cold and unforgiving. Cameras lined the walls, their red dots blinking like watchful eyes, beaming every second to millions glued to their screens. Reporters murmured, pens trembling, sensing something explosive about to erupt. This wasn't just procedure. It was a duel, a clash between inherited power and raw justice. Barron Trump entered with the arrogance of a political prince. His navy suit was razor sharp, his Rolex blinding under the lights, his smirk a silent taunt. Behind him marched three lawyers, stone-faced and armed with briefcases like shields of privilege. He carried himself as though the verdict was already sealed, daring the world to challenge the Trump dynasty. Then Jasmine Crockett appeared. No jewels, no pomp, just a steady gaze and a simple blazer. Her allies held nothing but documents. The contrast hit like thunder. Legacy swagger faced unbreakable resolve. The air tightened. America was about to witness war. The silence after Jasmine's steady entrance lingered, only a heartbeat before Barron seized the stage. He leaned into the microphone, voice booming through the chamber with the confidence of someone who believed the room already belonged to him. Congresswoman Crockett once said, "Barron Trump never earned his place, he only inherited it." That is not just an attack on me, it is an insult to my entire family. He straightened, eyes burning. "I am filing suit against Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett," he declared, his words slicing through the still air, "for defamation, for slander, and for deliberately sabotaging the legacy of the Trump family." His tone carried not just accusation, but ownership, as though the very laws were his to command. Every camera zoomed in tighter, capturing the moment he tried to turn a courtroom into his personal empire. Barron didn't stop at the legal declaration. His eyes narrowed, finding Jasmine across the room, and then came the sneer. "Ms. Crockett, if not for diversity laws, would you even be sitting here?" The question landed like a slap, dripping with venom designed to belittle not only Jasmine, but everyone who had ever fought for a seat at the table. A few scattered chuckles rolled through the chamber, cruel and sharp, feeding his arrogance. Reporters typed furiously, headlines already forming in their minds. Barron basked in it, enjoying the sting his words carried. He pressed forward, the smirk on his face deepening as he unleashed the next blow. "My father opened the doors of Harvard." "What did your father open?" "A repair shop." The insult echoed louder than the fluorescent hum above, calculated to strike at Jasmine's roots. Some lawmakers shifted uncomfortably, but others let out quiet laughs, indulging in the theater of humiliation. The cameras caught it all, the divide in the room as privilege mocked perseverance. Jasmine sat silent, her stillness only making Barron's voice sound more vicious. He mistook her composure for weakness. The tirade continued, Barron now pacing slightly, his confidence swelling with each word. "My family built an empire while you represent nothing more than the noisy mob on Twitter." The insult was laced with disdain, framing Jasmine as nothing more than background noise against the dynasty he claimed his family had built. A ripple of laughter and smug nods spread among a handful of allies, the room itself vibrating with tension. The performance was less a legal case and more a coronation of arrogance. Cameras captured his every gesture, as if Barron was auditioning for history. Barron's lead attorney rose, buttoning his jacket slowly before facing the chamber. His voice rang out, firm and deliberate. "Ladies and gentlemen, the accusations we address today are not minor. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett has inflicted irreparable damage on my client's reputation. She has dragged the Trump name into the mud with reckless claims designed to tarnish not just a man, but a legacy." He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air before pressing forward. "This is not about politics. This is about public trust, trust in a dynasty that has defined American strength for generations. By spreading falsehoods and half-truths, she has undermined that trust, and for that she must be held accountable. The attorney's words rolled across the room, polished and rehearsed, carrying the full authority of an empire's defense. When the attorney sat down, Barron leaned forward once more, delivering the final thrust. His voice slowed, heavy with mock authority, each syllable crafted to sting. Here the law belongs to legacy, not to a nobody like you. The room stiffened, the statement ringing with raw arrogance, a declaration that justice itself bowed to inherited power. Some lawmakers exchanged glances, a few smirked in approval, while others frowned, sensing the storm gathering just beyond the edge of Barron's bravado. The cameras did not blink. The audience at home held its breath. Barron believed he had already won, but the silence that followed felt like the pause before thunder. The arrogance of Barron's final words still echoed in the chamber when the camera swung back to Jasmine. She didn't rise to the bait. She didn't snap back or rush to defend herself. Instead, she sat perfectly still, her silence sharper than any insult, and then slowly placed both hands on a plain white envelope sealed with red wax. The chamber seemed to tighten, every eye locked on the simple object resting under her fingertips. For the first time that day, Barron's smirk flickered. The chairman leaned forward, his voice heavy with formality. "Congresswoman Crockett, do you wish to respond?" The air grew heavier, like the seconds before a storm breaks. Jasmine stood the movement, calm but deliberate, commanding attention without raising her voice. "I will not defend myself with empty words," she said, each syllable cutting with precision. "I will let the truth speak." The camera zoomed in, catching the intensity in her eyes as she held the envelope like a weapon waiting to be unsheathed. Barron's laugh broke the tension, cruel and mocking, bouncing off the marble walls. "Oh, what is it? Crockett, a utility bill. A love letter." His tone dripped with condescension, a show for his allies who chuckled along. But Jasmine didn't flinch, didn't even blink. She lifted her chin, staring straight through him as if stripping away his armor. "No, Mr. Trump," she replied, her voice cold steel. "These are the pieces you cannot erase. Evidence." The word rang out like a gunshot. The chamber froze. Reporters' fingers hovered above keyboards. Lawmakers held their breath. On live-stream chat feeds exploded with a single question repeated over and over. What's inside the moment had shifted. The arrogance, the sneers, the mocking laughter, all of it collided with the weight of the unknown. And for the first time, Barron wasn't in control. The silence was so thick, it felt alive. Jasmine broke the red wax seal, slid out a single sheet, and raised her voice so every corner of the chamber could hear. Her words rang out hard and cold. "Cut the need-based kids. Legacy first." The line hit like an explosion. The room froze. Reporters stopped mid-sentence, their fingers hovering above keyboards. Lawmakers leaned forward in disbelief. Cameras zoomed so close that every crease of the paper glowed on the screen. It was as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. For one brutal second, the chamber was pure silence. Then chaos. Photographers snapped like gunfire, the crowd buzzing, whispers breaking out. "Did she just say Keller Barron's attorneys looked like ghosts?" One, clutching his pen until it snapped, another, shaking his head in panic. Barron shot to his feet, his face red with rage. "This is fake," he shouted, his voice cracking. "A forged email. I'll sue every person in this room for spreading it." His words echoed, but they sounded desperate, hollow, as if even he didn't believe them. Jasmine didn't blink. Calmly, she slid another page across the table. The clerk lifted it, showed it to the chairman, a certified duplicate sealed with crimson ink, notarized and signed. "This is an official copy," Jasmine said, her tone like steel. "Dean Kenneth Keller. NYU admissions. Verified and stamped." The camera zoomed in again, beaming the wax seal into millions of homes. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Barron's lawyers glanced at each other, their silence saying more than any objection ever could. Then Jasmine opened a folder. Inside was a simple chart, but the truth screamed louder than numbers. The year Mr. Trump was admitted, she explained, voice-steady, need-based scholarships dropped by 31%. No new policy, no public explanation. She tapped the paper in her hand. And this email, time-stamped 10:42 a.m. Then she lifted another page, an admissions record. Barron Trump's preliminary approval, 10:59 a.m., 17 minutes later. The chamber erupted in murmurs, the math impossible to deny. The timing was too precise, the pattern too clear. On the live stream chat, feeds blew up in all caps. Caught legacy, fraud, she nailed him. Barron sank back in his chair, lips trembling, his smirk gone. The empire he wrapped himself in was crumbling, and Jasmine hadn't raised her voice once. She only let the evidence speak. The chamber still trembled from the shock of the email when Jasmine reached once more into her folder. The air seemed to tighten as she pulled out a sheet covered in stark black numbers. Slowly, she laid it flat on the table, tilting it toward the cameras. Every lens zoomed in, every reporter leaned forward. Even the chairman straightened in his chair, sensing what was coming. The silence was brittle, the kind that breaks only when something devastating lands. Jasmine lifted the sheet, her voice ringing out like a bell. This is the admissions record for the year Mr. Trump was admitted to NYU. 47 students were denied that same year. She paused, letting the number sink like a stone in deep water. 47 students who scored higher on the SAT. 47 with stronger GPAs, with more leadership roles, with more community service. Students who outperformed him in every measurable way. Her eyes cut across the chamber, locking on Barron. Yet he entered. They were cast aside. She turned the page and pointed at two names concealed but highlighted in bold. One student, perfect SAT score 1600, GPA 4.0, captain of the debate team, volunteer tutor for underprivileged children. Denied. Jasmine's finger slid down the page. Another SAT 1590, GPA 398, state science fair champion, founder of a nonprofit for veterans' families. Denied. She let the room absorb it before striking the blow, and Mr. Trump, his SAT scraped barely above average. His GPA was below 3.0. Yet somehow he walked through the door they were locked out of. A murmur rolled through the gallery. A woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Reporters scrambled for their keyboards, the clatter filling the chamber like gunfire. Some lawmakers whispered to one another, brows furrowed while journalists hammered their keyboards, words spilling onto live blogs faster than thought. Barron's attorneys fidgeted in their seats, pale and silent. Jasmine raised the chart higher. Her voice sharpened, words slicing through the room. Numbers do not lie. They don't write Trump bribed, but they reveal who was lifted up and who was shoved down. You don't need a smoking gun when the data itself tells the story. The microphone picked up the faint click of her finger against the page as she tapped the line, each sound echoing like a hammer strike. Barron let out a forced laugh, brittle and hollow. He straightened his tie, trying to salvage his bravado. Statistics prove nothing. Numbers cannot show intent. These records don't prove I broke any law. His voice cracked at the edges, and though he tried to smirk, his lips trembled. His words hung in the air, weak, defensive, and already collapsing. Jasmine did not blink, her gaze fixed on him, steady as a blade. She leaned into the microphone, her tone low, but carrying the weight of judgment. You are right, Mr. Trump. The numbers do not prove you broke a law. They prove something far worse. A single beat of silence, then her voice rose like a strike of lightning. They prove the law itself was bent for you because of your name. And when it bent for you, it slammed shut on 47 others who had nothing but their effort. The chamber erupted. Cries of outrage, shouts of disbelief, gasps that carried like a wave across the marble walls. A man in the gallery stood up, his voice cracking. My son was one of them. Security rushed to quiet him, but his words hung heavy in the air. Another woman sobbed openly, clutching the rejection letter of her daughter. The sound of grief mixed with fury until it became a storm. The chairman pounded his gavel, calling for order, but the room was alive with anger impossible to contain. Barron sat rigid, his jaw locked, his knuckles bone white as they gripped the edge of the desk. His empire, his legacy, his arrogance, all of it was being dismantled by simple numbers. Jasmine held the paper high, unshaken, her face hard with conviction. She hadn't shouted, she hadn't raged, but her evidence roared louder than any insult ever could. And for the first time, Barron Trump looked small. The roar of outrage over the statistics had barely quieted when Jasmine reached calmly into her folder once again. The room was buzzing, restless lawmakers shifting the gallery on edge. She picked up a small black device, set it on the table, and pressed a single button. A faint hiss of static filled the chamber, followed by a voice trembling, hesitant, but unmistakably real. The Trump family called. We know what we have to do. Legacy first. The words hung like smoke curling through the chamber and choking every whisper into silence. For a split second, no one moved. Then the explosion came. Reporters jumped to their feet, cameras flashing, the chamber erupting in shock. "Play it again," someone shouted from the gallery. The sound technician's hands hovered stunned as the recording looped, the phrase legacy first echoing like a drumbeat no one could ignore. Barron lurched upright, his face red, his voice cracking into a scream. "This is fake, a doctored tape, a political setup." He jabbed a finger toward Jasmine's spit catching on his lips. "This is an ambush, nothing more than a conspiracy." His attorneys scrambled beside him, shuffling papers, but even they looked rattled, sweat beading along their brows. The words from the recording kept ringing louder with every replay, legacy first. Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She stood with slow precision, her hand resting on the envelope that had already shredded Barron's defense. Her voice cut through the chaos, calm but sharp enough to slice the noise in half. "If it's fake, test it. Run it through forensic analysis. I welcome it." She let the words linger, her gaze sweeping the panel before adding, with iron certainty, "The original file has already been submitted to the Federal Oversight Committee." The chamber convulsed. Lawmakers exchanged shocked looks. Aides rushed notes across the table. Reporters screamed questions that collided into a wall of noise. The chairman leaned back in his chair, his gavel frozen midair, as though even he wasn't sure what to say. The gallery was alive with gasps and cries, people clinging to one another as the weight of what they had heard sank in. Barron slammed his fist onto the table so hard that his water glass toppled, shattering on the marble floor. "Lies," he roared, his face a furious shade of crimson. "You can't destroy my family with fabrications." But the rage in his voice betrayed him. His words no longer carried authority. They carried desperation. The more he shouted, the smaller he seemed, his empire shrinking with each denial. Jasmine stayed still, her eyes locked on him, unmoved by his fury. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. The recording still echoed in the chamber, the trembling voice of the admissions officer confessing the truth Barron couldn't outrun. Every time legacy first replayed in people's minds, it drowned his protests, reduced them to background noise. And for the first time that day, the Trump name did not dominate the room. It cowered beneath the sound of evidence. The last echo of the recording was still hanging in the air when Barron snapped his fingers at an aide and thrust a tablet toward the screens. A new video filled the monitors, Jasmine at a microphone, her mouth forming words that seemed to betray her. The audio was crisp too, crisp as a clipped voice declared, "Yes, I made it up. The evidence isn't real." It was the kind of sentence that could shatter a reputation in seconds. A ripple of shock cut through the chamber. Reporters shot to their feet, craning for a better view. Pens dropped, cameras jolted into new angles, capturing every pixel of the damning footage. A few lawmakers traded wary glances, suspicion flickering across their faces like sparks. Barron's grin stretched wider, feeding on the wave of doubt he had manufactured. He jabbed at the screen with triumph, his voice booming through the chaos. "Here, Ms. Crockett confessed the game is over." Jasmine did not move, did not flinch. Only the slow rise of her breath betrayed the weight of the moment. "Send it to the technicians now," she said, voice steady and clear. "Verify provenance, chain of custody, and source metadata. Pull the original from the device and compare hashes." She turned to the chair. "Immediate verification, please." An usher hurried the tablet to the technical bench while the chamber buzzed like a live wire, the uncertainty sharper than any insult. At the back, two congressional technicians went to work, eyes locked on dual monitors. Freeze frame at 2 seconds now, overlay, one ordered, fingers flying. Frame edges don't match. Light fall off on the cheek is from a different hearing room. The second zoomed into the waveform. Audio formants are synthetic. The sibilants are cloned. Lip movement is 3 frames out of sync. A side-by-side appeared on the main screen. On the left, the supposed confession. On the right, the original clip from a prior hearing, same blazer, different badge, different day. The lead tech lifted his mic. "This is a deep fake." The clip is spliced from an earlier session with generated voice and mismatched frames. The room flipped in an instant, from suspicion to anger, from doubt to clarity. Barron's smile withered, color drained from his face. His lawyers bent close, whispering fast papers, rustling with the panic of people who had run out of exits. Jasmine turned to him, her gaze unwavering. You didn't just lie when you walked through a university door. You're lying here in front of the American people. The chamber erupted into applause, sharp and unanimous, rolling over the marble like thunder. Barron stared at the desk, pale and rigid, while his counsel kept whispering, but no answer came. The last tremor from the deepfake reveal was still fading when the chairman called the next witness. A young man stepped from the aisle with careful measured steps, a thin folder held tight against his chest. State your name, the clerk said. Joshua Alvarez, he answered, voice steady but soft. He wore an off-the-rack suit and the look of someone who had learned to be polite in rooms that weren't built for him. He set the folder on the table, opened it, and lifted a single page, the NYU letter of denial, so the cameras could see the date and the timestamp stamped in blue ink matching the day of the Keller email, and the minute Barron's preliminary approval was logged. Joshua cleared his throat and spoke into the microphone. I'm a first-generation student, he said. My mother is a home health aide. My father drives a city bus. I work nights at a grocery and weekends at a hardware store. My SAT was 15 or 80. My GPA was 3.98. I captained the robotics team and volunteered at a community clinic. He swallowed, eyes bright but unblinking. I didn't lose my seat. I was never allowed in. I just wanted to study, not beg. The words lingered heavy and plain, making the room feel smaller. The chamber went still as stone. A woman in the gallery pressed a tissue to her mouth. A man lowered his head and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Reporters forgot their keyboards for a moment, just watching the single sheet in Joshua's hands, that stubborn stamp of rejection that shared a date with the email that said legacy first. The chairman shifted as if the chair beneath him had grown suddenly uncomfortable. You could hear the cords in the microphones hum. Then a harsh voice cracked the quiet. Barron leaned into his mic, trying to sneer and swallowing something closer to panic. A nobody kid, he spit, waving a dismissive hand. Jasmine turned her head, not rushed, not rattled, and faced Barron squarely. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. It's the nobodies who are America's backbone. And you're just the shadow of a name. The sentence struck with the clean force of a gavel. People in the gallery started to clap before they remembered where they were. Others simply sat with tears on their cheeks, the sound of their hands pressed together, soft but certain. Joshua folded the letter back into the folder and stood quietly, the way people do when they have said all they can say, and the rest belongs to the room. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of anger, of recognition of the simple math that had pushed one student out while another name walked in. The echo of Joshua's testimony had barely faded when the streets outside the Capitol began to pulse. Students poured out, first hoodies, backpacks, homemade signs held high, followed by parents gripping photocopies of rejection letters. Teachers marched shoulder to shoulder, grade books tucked under their arms like quiet badges of duty. Veterans fell into a measured cadence, boots thudding, metals flashing in the pale light. The chant rose clean and fierce, rolling down the avenues like a drum line. Fair chance for all, police set up soft barricades, but the wave kept growing steady and unstoppable. By noon, the city sounded like a single heartbeat. A mother lifted her child onto her shoulders so he could see the steps where decisions were made. A physics teacher led a row of seniors, each wearing a number 47 pinned to their jackets. A veteran carried a folded flag in one hand and a sign in the other. Opportunity is service. College counselors passed out water and manila folders of guidance notes promising to help every kid reapply no matter how long it took. The chant sharpened, echoing against stone and glass until it felt carved into the building's fair chance for all. A low wind moved the banners as if the city itself were nodding. Inside studio walls, the media pulled the story apart with surgical focus. Anchors queued up the screenshot of the email. The chart with 47 denied the waveform of the trembling voice saying legacy first. Analysts drew lines between policy and practice, showing how a quiet preference could tilt an entire class. One historian said it plainly, this was not Barron versus Jasmine. This was the country versus a pipeline that rewarded last names over effort. Editorial boards called legacy admissions a velvet rope in a public lobby, then asked how many Joshuas had been turned away in the dark. In newsrooms, producers pushed side-by-sides that made the pattern impossible to ignore. That afternoon, Barron's machine roared to life. He hired a top-shelf PR firm and launched a slick campaign called Future First Pass. 30-second spots rolled across YouTube and streaming news promising transparent reform and a merit-based future. The ads were clean, bright, scored with confident strings and wide shots of campus greens. He stood at a podium and said, "We will fix the system," as if he hadn't just benefited from it. Influencers posted coordinated captions, think pieces appeared overnight, and a website offered a pledge with his signature at the bottom. The production was perfect, but the timing was poison. The public did not buy it because they had already seen too much. They had seen the line in black and white cut the need-based kids. Legacy first. They had seen the numbers that stacked like bricks, SAT GPA service leadership, and still ended in denied. They had heard the recording, the nerves in the voice, the words, "No one could walk back." They had watched Joshua lift a single page with a date that matched and say, "I just wanted to study, not beg." On courthouse walls, students projected the email at night, letters blazing 10 feet high. Drivers honked and raised their fist without slowing. Once the truth is out, it does not shrink, it keeps breathing, and the whole city can hear it. The chamber felt like it was holding its breath. Barron Trump, once strutting with a smirk, now sat collapsed in his chair. His shoulders sagged, his chin almost touching his chest. The arrogance had drained from his face, replaced by a pallor that made him look older, smaller, less certain of the dynasty he carried on his name. His fists were clenched white against the table, but he no longer looked at Jasmine. The sneer was gone. The mocking smile was gone. For the first time, Barron Trump looked like a man cornered by truth. Jasmine rose slowly from her seat. Each step measured her heels, clicking against the floor like a metronome of justice. She walked to the center of the chamber, the cameras following her every movement. When she reached the microphone, she paused, letting silence become its own spotlight. Then her voice rang out, calm but commanding. "Power is not inherited. It has to be proven. And today, justice has been proven." Her words echoed off the marble walls, crisp and undeniable. She let the weight of that line sink in before she pressed forward. Her gaze swept the chamber, steady and unblinking. "I think of Joshua," she said, "and I think of the millions of other Joshuas out there. Students who worked, who sacrificed, who carried the weight of their families' hopes. They were turned away, not because they lacked talent, not because they lacked discipline, but because they lacked a powerful last name." The audience shifted, eyes, moist jaws tight, the gallery holding back tears and fury at the same time. Jasmine's voice cracked slightly, not from weakness, but from sincerity. "That is the injustice we must face." Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens scratching across paper, while cameras zoomed in to capture every line of her face. The air was electric, vibrating with the knowledge that this was no longer about one man or one courtroom. It was about a system that had just been dragged into the light. A journalist called out from the press box, voice sharp enough to pierce the hush. "Congresswoman, do you believe Mr. Trump will try to strike back? Do you believe he'll fight again?" Jasmine's lips tightened into the faintest smile. She leaned into the microphone, her words steady as stone. "He may," she said, "he may try, but this time the whole nation has seen the truth. And once the truth wakes up, it does not fall back asleep." Her voice didn't rise, didn't need to. The clarity was enough. A murmur of approval swept through the crowd, then broke into scattered applause, then surged into a wave of clapping that filled the room like thunder. The gavel slammed, but even the chairman couldn't quiet it fully. Outside, the sound was even louder. On the steps of the Capitol, students raised their fists and chanted. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder, their voices booming. Parents lifted signs, their children perched on their shoulders. Teachers waved banners made from chalk-stained bedsheets. Fair chance for all. The chant roared, unified and unstoppable. From the steps to the sidewalks, from the plaza to the avenues, it was a chorus of voices stretching block after block, demanding a reckoning. Helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting the chants across the country. Every screen in America carried the sound, every ear heard it, every eye saw the truth Jasmine had forced into daylight. Back inside, Jasmine stepped down from the microphone, her face calm, her body still. She didn't raise her arms in victory. She didn't bask in applause. She simply stood, letting the storm of support crash around her. She knew this was bigger than herself. She was only the vessel that carried it here. Her allies gathered at her side, but she never looked away from the truth that had been laid bare in that chamber. The cameras shifted again this time, focusing on Barron. The applause and chants outside didn't belong to him. The spotlight no longer obeyed his name. He sat stiff, his eyes staring forward with a hollow glare. The pale mask of defeat covered him, but beneath it something darker flickered. The camera zoomed close, no tears, no cracks, only a cold stare, eyes hard as glass burning with something that wasn't gone but waiting. His lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically, but Barron barely moved. His lips twitched, and then he leaned toward the counsel's ear. His voice was low, almost a growl, but the microphone near him caught the words. "The game is not over." The phrase slithered through the room like smoke. It wasn't loud, but everyone heard it. Some gasped, others shook their heads. The gavel struck again, calling for order, but the sound barely mattered. The contrast was too sharp, Jasmine's steady conviction against Barron's cold defiance. The cameras split their feed, half on her, half on him, two faces locked in opposition, two paths diverging in front of the nation. The meaning was unmistakable. This was not just a courtroom skirmish, not just a political feud. It was a wake-up call for America's education system, a warning that fairness was not guaranteed, that justice had to be fought for tooth and nail. Jasmine had forced the truth into the open, but the fight was not finished. The people outside knew it, the lawmakers inside knew it, and even Barron, with his final whisper, admitted it. The chamber lights blazed, the cameras kept rolling, and the air held the weight of a reckoning. On one side, cheers and chants demanding change. On the other, a cold whisper of revenge. The story had not ended. It had only shown how high the stakes truly were. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.